Joan, what is your leadership role in our community?
I have several leadership roles. I am, of course, I'm vice president for the Council for the Homeless, and then I'm vice chair of Bridgeview, and I'm the chair of Vancouver Housing Authority, and I'm the chair of Support for Early Learning and Families. And I sit as a member on the Children's Home Society of Children's Home Society of Washington, the Community Advisory Committee. Although I'm supposed to be retired.
Yes, you're the opposite of retired. You're working all the time.
Yeah. And I just transitioned from a leadership role in the VA to having more time to play a leadership role in our community. So
that's important. Joan, why is it important to have women in leadership positions?
I think it's more than equality or equity. I mean, it's more of an equity issue than an equality issue, I believe. But I think the real reason we need to have women in leadership positions is we view the world differently. We have different perspectives to offer. And I remember years ago hearing this is a psychologist who taught at the University of Washington, because we bear children. And in the days of the caveman, that's what we were always thinking. You know, women had to think about protecting the child and getting the food, and men don't have that ability. So the perspective, some men have it, but by and large, they have a very different perspective on how to solve problems and how to think strategically. Because and it goes back to what she said was that, you know, it's genetics. I often think about what would it be like if we had women leaders right now in Russia and Ukraine, and just think about the differences, that the different views we have on, because we have that ability to think ahead, and it's part of our genetic makeup.
Who is a woman who has inspired you?
My mom.
Okay, and why is that?
Well, my mom was she was married to my dad, and there were 4 children in the family, and my dad's in the Air Force, and so that means we basically lived in poverty. And but my mother she's a fabulous mother, but she also became sort of the head of the household when my dad was at a leadership academy and got hit in the head with a handball and had a stroke.
Oh.
So my mom had to manage all of us kids growing up, plus taking care of my dad. And when my dad went to rehab, you know, finally went to rehab and got a job. It was just, so I just saw my mother's resilience, and yet at the same time, after my dad died, my mom, you know, she never thought about getting married again. It was just those deep ingrained Finnish values, and but I just admired her for her resilience in life and her ability to show she cared, and what she would do for all of us children was just wonderful. So,
Joan, what is a stereotype that you feel people have about women?
It varies from being dependent to being independent, and the women who then get to be independent they're called bitches.
Yes, I agree with that.
And weak to strong, and again the same thing, you know, that there's a lot of women who are strong yet dependent, and yet, you know, they're caught in a situation, whether it's a domestic situation or a poverty situation, and somehow they're still strong and they have the resilience. And I think about women who live in poverty and take care of children and families, and as we think they're weak, you know how it takes a lot of strength to live in poverty.
Oh my goodness.
It's just
unbelievable.
And so sometimes those words they get mixed up. I mean, I would like to have a stereotype that women are full partners, and we can be caring, and we can be tough, and we can be independent, we can be weak, and we can be strong. We can be all of those things, just as the same as men. You know, where men, it's okay for men to be emotional, and so. But that's my stereotype. It varies, and the stronger you get, the more likely you're called out as as a bitch.
Yeah. Men get praised for being multifaceted, but that's an excellent point. Women, you really kind of get to be just the kind of weak independent, or you're a bitch.
You know, rising to become CEOs of company. I just read this the other day that it's in the book, Making Numbers Count. And there are more men named James in CEO positions than there are the total number of women in CEO positions.
Oh, women total. There's more men just with the name James than there are women total CEOs. That's
really points to that inequality, you know, of women, because we have, and if a woman is promoted into a CEO position, it's like it's news. It should be known. It's just like.
What achievement made by suffragettes, feminists, or women in general are you most thankful for?
Well, the right to vote. But we still need to pass the ERA. The ERA is still not passed, or I have to tell you a little story about it. So I used to travel a lot for the VA, and we had an education center in Salt Lake City, and so I would go to Salt Lake City quite often for meetings. And in those days, I had, I was wearing a little ERA button on my raincoat, and the state of Utah, of course, did not support the ERA.
Little conservative.
We were there, and when I got into the taxi at the airport, the taxi driver looked at me and he saw the ERA button and he said, "Oh, you're one of those women."
Those women.
And then the interesting thing is, I was there with a colleague. We were at a conference, and we left the conference a little bit early when they made the announcement that normally the Mormon Tabernacle Choir did choir practice on Thursday nights. And when I'd been there before, I'd always gone to the choir practice. It's beautiful to hear that choir sing, and especially in their practice. Well, we missed the announcement that it was not, there was no practice that night. There was a closed ceremony for employees of the Mormon Church. And so it's not something that we knew about. So, I still had my ERA button on my raincoat. And as we got to the tabernacle to go in, I kept thinking, this doesn't seem like choir practice. And then I realized when they were handing out programs that I had my coat with my ERA button on it. We should not have been there, but we ended up sitting and watching this very inside service in the Mormon Church that I can't, but it was a horrendous thing, an experience to hear some of the things that were said about women.
I can't imagine. And this whole time you're sitting there with an ERA button, you were like behind enemy lines.
That's right. We were intruders, and so we just sat there. We didn't say anything, but boy, but we still need to pass the ERA. And I have my ERA button tucked away, and there's been some movement on that, but that's something that needs to happen.
How crazy that's like a political statement, is just saying, hello, we would like to have the same rights as you.
That's right. That's in many cases we don't. So, and that means, so you even begin to think about one of the biggest challenges that women face today is being recognized for their talents and advancing into different roles in the company. And then again, that issue that's been going on for years, it was even talked about the ERA, and I think it's increased about 3 cents, but we know that comparing the median salary between men and women in 2021, women earn 82 cents for every dollar men earn.
And that's just white women, right? It's even less for women of color.
That's right. For those people that live in poverty, you just begin to think about if that could be equalized. It's just so that's a huge challenge, and it gets back to that. It's an equity issue in terms of salary. And then I think the other one is that we're under-recognized for the talents in general that we could offer. And it's like, it shouldn't be newsworthy when a woman,
CEO,
at some point in time, it won't be newsworthy when a woman runs for president or runs for vice president or runs for, it's less so in the state legislature now, where it's not so much an unusual situation, but that needs to be much more universal.
Joan, who is your favorite historical female figure?
I have two, Florence Nightingale and Lillian Wald.
Okay.
And Florence Nightingale not only was, working as a nurse in the Crimea, she was a scientist, and she was the person that really changed the paradigm in healthcare about using data to solve problems. She's a public health nurse, and so she was highly regarded for her mathematical ability and her ability to manage data. Now, we just think about her as the lady with the lamp in Crimea, but she was doing very different things in a society that didn't, being a nurse, first of all, back then was a low-life profession, and she helped raise that, but she also, some of what she established was the principles of public health today, in this day and age.
Still today.
My second hero is Lillian Wald, who was a nurse early 1900s who really established the profession of public health nursing. And she would talked about when she was back in the slums of New York how important it was for children to have a playground, that they had to have green grass. The whole thing about public health is it's invisible, and a lot of the leaders in public health have been women.
What does feminism mean to you?
Just the strengths, insight, perspectives that we have from women. You can be independent, yet you can be in a partner or a relationship with a husband or a spouse or somebody else. It doesn't mean that you give up your feminism one way or the other.
Absolutely. You can be strong and soft. It's the dichotomy of woman.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
All right. One last question. What is one way you personally will be honoring strong women during Women's History Month?
Talking about it. Just talking about
it. Yes.
Talking about it. It's like talking with people about it's Women's History Month, or who is the woman, some of these questions. Who is your favorite historical female figure? Just doing that as so at the VHA board meeting this month, or in March, I'll bring up this is National Women's History Month, and I'll ask my other board members, some of maybe a couple of these questions that you've asked me. So, so I think that's what we need to do. Same with the Self board. I'll do that. This is Women's History Month, and of course, we have a lot to do with children. And Self is about support for early learning and families. And so, so I think that's the best thing. And then, like I said, asking asking others some of the questions that you've asked me.
Thank you so much again.